There's a new movie out from Full Moon Features called The Primevals you may or may not have seen advertised around online that's sort of not exactly a new movie. It's actually a movie that was in production and pre-production at various points over many decades in the past that was only recently able to be fully completed to releasable state and is now being made available to stream online and show at theatrical engagements before bowing on home video later on this fall. It's a science fiction adventure film with a deliberately old-fashioned throwback aesthetic about lizard men, yetis, monsters, explorers, and lots of other nifty cool stuff, and an incredible production history I'll expand on elsewhere in this episode. Suffice to say for now, I think it's a really cool retro movie, and if you're a fan of the kind of stuff that often turns up on Schlocktober, movies or weird episodes of The Big Picture, those kind of episodes, you'd really enjoy it, and I think you should check it out. Give this one a look. I really recommend it. That's not a paid endorsement of any kind, not a commercial endorsement. I just think it's a cool movie. It's also quite a bit much more than that, to the point where I just kind of got twisted up in my head as to how to even talk about or approach how much more, until I wasn't. And then I sort of found a shape to the feelings that it raised. And, well, no point belaboring that. So, David W. Allen was extremely private, as he lived most of his life behind the scenes of even the best-known productions he worked on. There aren't a great many biographical details to be sourced about his end of life or life period, which is just a genuine shame. When he does turn up as part of the historic record in the appendices and making-of ephemera for better-known works in popular cinema, it's often talking about work that didn't make it into the film, or some contribution that was months of his own life that became a tiny piece of finished work because modern tech hadn't been moving away from stop-frame animation faster than it could invent its replacement.
Well, sometime during this period, the film was reviewed by the studio, and they decided that they would like to have another try at doing the werewolf suit idea. The werewolf standing in front of this is the only thing that survives of the work that I did in the picture. And it's used in a kind of a montage. It's kind of like the center element of a three-element dissolve. I don't think it ever completely comes into full exposure. It's just a fragment of the three werewolves, sort of one of them baying up at the moon, presumably, at the very end of the picture. So they got some use out of the puppets that were made, but of course the bigger scenes that I worked hard on weren't in the picture.
The Criterion Collection release of Equinox featured a lot of very heartfelt words from his surviving colleagues, along with his rarely seen short children's feature, The Magic Treasure. While Full Moon and Charles Band have consistently made it a point to highlight their longtime collaborations, there was a featurette specifically about Allen called Wizard of Wars on one of the recent Robot Wars releases, and a feature documentary about the long road to the final film called Lost to Time, Unearthing the Primevals, about the making of the film and its maker, that's being included in their box set for the Blu-ray. And that brings us to the anticlimax, for me, and what likely ends up as a somewhat meandering YouTube essay, so in other words, a YouTube essay. Certainly not an anticlimax for the movie or its history. The question of how is The Primevals as an actual movie, regarded apart from all the baggage it has to the degree it can be. It's fine, pretty good even. As I also found to be the case with Magic Treasure, Allen was, as creator, working on his own, very much kin to Jack Kirby, about whom it could be said, if you sat down to read through the fascinatingly bizarre stuff like New Gods or Eternals as comics and not just out-of-context art pieces, that as a storyteller, Kirby was a magnificent artist. Similarly, Allen, as narrative filmmaker, appears to have been a magnificent animator and effects craftsman. But what they seem to have had in common also is imagination and ambition that exceeded even themselves. Looking at the detail of even their minor work, you can feel the enormous power of huge ideas and constantly expanding thoughts swelling against the limitations of even their considerable talents to express. Apparently, the Full Moon Blu-ray will come with an alternate cut incorporating more of Allen's own unfinished pre-theatrical footage, test shots, and demo reels to construct a fuller picture of what his broader vision might have looked like in earlier development. As stands here, this version, effectively the one being prepared in the 90s when he passed, is effectively a sort of Michael Crichton by way of Ray Harryhausen retro sci-fi adventure story, played at full sincerity, mashing up old-time Lost World stories in the Conan Doyle, H. Rider Haggard vein with then-modern science exploration and mystery genres. What's probably most surprising is that it's not simply a showcase case for stop-motion creatures just all over the place. There's a Yeti and a race of lizard creatures who are the main attractions, and we get plenty of them, but Allen is seemingly setting to tell a real story with real themes, ideas, and even messages. He's pretty serious about communicating beyond look at the monster, and it's one of the things that makes a feature that was almost definitely going to feel charmingly old-fashioned even in the 90s feel like an unstuck-in-time mythic gem that it sort of now is. The premise involves an exploration to recover a live Yeti specimen in the Himalayas after a dead specimen is found, and upon examination reveals evidence of genetic and medical augmentation that raise questions about not only the creature's origin, but the evolution and origin of life on Earth itself. And since the trailers and posters all feature bug-eyed green lizard men with space lasers part of the story as well, no, you don't get a prize for guessing what's actually going on here, though points for the actual explanation for how it all fell into place being a novel twist on the premise. And that is exactly the genre and mindset of movie, perhaps decades beyond its sell-by-date circumstances notwithstanding, where the scenes in between the monsters and chases are dominated by the scientist characters debating the meaning and prospect of ancient aliens or evolutionary cul-de-sacs in total sincerity that are meant to be as, if not more edifying than the rampaging Yeti business, though there is still rampaging Yeti business. The lizard men, I think they're the Primevals, but I could be wrong about that, are still bad guys who are kind of dicks for the sake of being dicks, and they throw spears around and make scary frog noises at people, and those two tones being crammed together as though they're the most natural fit in the world is what makes this either work for you or not work at all. It really works for me. I keep coming back to this quote from Brian Eno, and not just because I made a pretentious Adam Curtis joke earlier. Whatever you now find weird, ugly, uncomfortable, and nasty about a new medium will surely become its signature. CD distortion, the jitteriness of digital video, the crap sound of 8-bit, all of those will be cherished and emulated as soon as they can be avoided. It's the sound of failure. So much of modern art is the sound of things going out of control, of a medium pushing to its limits and breaking apart. The distorted guitar sound is the sound of something too loud for the medium supposed to carry it. The blues singer with the cracked voice is the sound of an emotional cry too powerful for the throat that releases it. The excitement of grainy film, of bleached out black and white, is the excitement of witnessing events too momentous for the medium assigned to record them. I don't know how specifically that should apply to how David Allen approached his effects animation. It can't be known what sort of techniques he'd be working with today if he were working at all at 79, how much of his commitment to necessity versus preference, and even as I can easily see a thematic through line between the energy Eno was talking about and the always clearly handmade and all the more compelling for its charm of stop-motion creatures, and the kind of handmade practical special effects movie stuff I'm such a fan of generally, what's delightful about the Primevals as a singular movie in itself is that it's lovingly crafted as a small specific object. It doesn't become overwhelmed by trying to live up to the impossible legacy of being its own creator's career summation project or a posthumous monument to be erected by his friends and loved ones in his absence. The work speaks for that. The movie is the, oh yeah, the one with the lizard guys and the Yeti, I remember that, it was pretty cool, kind of eternal fixture of video shelves and cable reruns when those existed that it was perhaps ever destined to be. But it does, or did, feel hard to get around the contradiction that it means so much more than that when it's an actual miracle that it exists at all, just like it was a miracle that fanzine-gorging home movie makers like Sam Raimi or Peter Jackson got called up to do Lord of the Rings and Spider-Man, just like it was a miracle that any of the original wave, pre-Google cash spigot, pre-platform really, backyard filmmaker YouTubers ever got seen by anyone at all, let alone seen widely enough to become any kind of name for themselves, just like it feels like more and more it'll take a miracle for that kind of space to be seen or grow up or level up to exist anymore ever. Everywhere you look, it's like more ladders are being pulled up and more gates firmly kept than ever, just as the worst possible examples of the last people just one number ahead in line shoved their way up, with less and less vectors for those who deserved it, who earned it, to even get a chance at making it to where they're supposed to be. And instead, more and more of the spoils and credit go to the useless, the worthless, and the cruel, usually all of the above. Some glob-shaped creep will buy the right to stick his name on other people's work and call himself an inventor because daddy owns an emerald mine, or they'll decide AI art can do the job better because it doesn't talk back about the notes, and some especially evil bastard will say they deserved it. But sometimes, something still breaks through. Sometimes the bad guys still fucking lose. Sometimes the good guys still get to win, and sometimes even death and time can't stop it. And this feels like one of those. And that feels good to know.